So, when you picture a Victorian woman, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, it's probably a super tightly laced corset, right? A mountain of fabric, a life packed with strict, stuffy rules. It's an image of being trapped. But what if that's only half the story? What if the very things that look like cages, the fashion, the homemaking magazines, were actually secret tools for a whole new kind of freedom? Yeah, this is the classic image we all have. It's a cartoon, obviously, but it shows a woman literally being lowered into her clothes like she's being put in a cage. And this really nails our modern assumption, that Victorian fashion was this totally oppressive thing women just had to put up with. And look, to be fair, there was a lot to put up with.
Because before we can really get into the escape, we have to understand the prison. And for so many Victorian women, their world really was a kind of gilded cage. It might have looked beautiful from the outside, but on the inside, it was incredibly constrained. And not just by fashion, but by the law itself. I mean, just look at this. The legal reality was pretty stark. The moment a woman got married, in the eyes of the law, she pretty much stopped being her own person. She became an extension of her husband, her property, any money she earned, even her own body. Legally, it was all under his control. The right to vote? Nope. To sue someone? Not a chance. And getting a divorce was basically impossible. The whole system was built to keep a woman's place firmly in the home. But, even as this world was being so rigidly defined, something else was happening. A new force was starting to bubble up, right from inside the home itself. Literacy rates were on the rise, a new middle class had more free time, and printing technology was getting better and cheaper. And all of that led to a brand new industry that just exploded, the women's magazine. And you have to understand, this was a huge deal. It was completely revolutionary. For the very first time, women in totally different parts of the country were all reading the same articles, looking at the same fashion plates, even writing into the same advice columns. It connected this huge, previously isolated audience and created this shared cultural conversation on a national scale. It was a game changer. At first glance, though, if you were to pick up one of these magazines, you'd think they were designed to just lock that gilded cage and throw away the key. They basically read like instruction manuals for how to be the perfect Victorian woman. I mean, their pages were just packed with advice on everything. Cooking, cleaning, how to be the perfect hostess, how to raise your kids. They even came with paper patterns so you could sew your own dresses to look just like the latest styles from Paris. They were, in essence, handing you a blueprint for how to become the angel in the house, that perfect, quiet, domestic, respectable wife and mother. Okay, but here's where it starts to get really interesting. We've built this picture of total control, total conformity, right? Both in the law and in the culture. But was that really it? Was every single woman just passively accepting this blueprint for her life? Let's float a different idea here. What if these very magazines and the crazy fashions they were pushing actually held the seeds of their own rebellion? What if women were finding freedom not by throwing these things away, but by using them in some really clever, unexpected ways? All right, let's start with the most obvious symbol of restriction, the clothes. We tend to think of Victorian fashion as just this straight line of tighter and tighter corsets, but the reality was way more dynamic. So here we have the crinoline. This is that gigantic bell-shaped cage you put under your skirt that was huge in the 1850s and 60s. And yeah, it was a nightmare. It was this rigid structure all around you, which made it super hard to get through a doorway or walk through a crowd or even just sit down. But then came the bustle. And this marks a really clear evolution. All that crazy volume is swept to the back, which leaves the front and the sides a lot narrower. Now, this wasn't just a style choice. It was practical. It made it way easier to move. Compared to that all-encompassing crinoline, the bustle was a huge step towards actual physical freedom. And this contrast right here just shows you the new range of choices that was starting to open up. On the left, you've got a pretty typical day dress from that bustle era. But on the right, whoa, that's a cycling suit. It's got a split skirt, which is basically the great-grandmother of pants for women. This wasn't just about fashion anymore. It was about function. See, the new woman of the late Victorian era was getting active. She was playing tennis, she was riding a bicycle, she was even fencing, and all these new activities demanded new kinds of clothes that let you actually move your body in ways that were totally unthinkable before. Women were literally pushing the boundaries of fashion to make room for their bigger, more active lives. But the fashion offered another kind of freedom too, a much more audacious, sneaky kind of freedom.
This cartoon gives us a little hint. All that volume in those skirts, it created the perfect hiding place. And that led to this amazing phenomenon called bustle smuggling. Dressmakers and milliners would go to Europe and hide thousands of dollars of taxable goods, lace, gloves, you name it, inside their bustles to get them past customs.
And look, this wasn't just some fringe thing a few people did. It was so common that the New York Times wrote about it. They straight up said that smuggling went down not because of better security, but because the fashion changed to tighter skirts and there was nowhere left to hide the goods. It's a direct admission that women were using this very symbol of their supposed delicacy as a tool for, well, a legal economic enterprise. It got so big, it actually created new jobs for women. By 1888, the problem was so bad that the New York Custom House had to hire 20 female inspectresses whose whole job was just to search other women they suspected of smuggling. So women were using fashion to create economic opportunities on both sides of the law.
Okay, so fashion was a pretty surprising tool for freedom. But what about the magazines that were promoting it all? Let's circle back to them, because it turns out these little manuals for domestic life also became powerful tools for change.
It's kind of a paradox, right? While they were celebrating the private domestic woman, these magazines were also creating a powerful public platform for them. They turned writing and editing into a real profession for women, giving them their own income and a voice. And those advice columns, they created this amazing sense of community, letting women all over the country know that they weren't alone.
And this new public platform became the main stage for the single most important debate of the time, the woman question. This was the big catch-all term for the whole conversation about what a woman's role in society should be. Should women get a real education? Should they be allowed to own property? Should they get the right to vote?
So these magazines, these supposedly harmless little things full of recipes and fashion tips, they started smuggling in radical ideas. They brought the debate about women's rights right into the middle-class home and put it on the parlor table. It started cautiously, maybe with an article about higher education for girls, but eventually it grew into open discussions about property rights and, yes, even suffrage. And you can draw a straight line from them to us. That whole model these Victorian magazines created, that mix of advice, aspiration, ads, and social commentary, it's the direct ancestor of pretty much all the lifestyle media we have today, from Vogue all the way to Good Housekeeping. So it kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? These magazines were these incredibly powerful forces in telling Victorian women who they should be, for better and for worse. And it really makes you wonder, in our world today with all of our media, who or what is teaching us how to live? Where are we getting our blueprints for life?